and he doesn't own a vineyard.
That's why I love you, baby. You already go ahead.
Well, let's get our show started. Welcome to 100 Yards of Football. I'm Harper LeBel. That's Vincent Turner. No, you're over on that side. Vincent Turner, our producer, and Logan Landers. And we're going to start a new show today. We're going to call it Teammates of the Past. People that I've played with in one way, shape, or form over my 11-year career in the National Football League, but folks that have had an influence on others, whether it be through their high school, their college, their pro career, or things that they're doing afterwards. And the guy we're going to feature first here today is a guy that did all of the above. Terry Hoage. If you're a Georgia native, then you know about Terry Hoage and his career at the University of Georgia. What a difference maker. He was a part of the recruiting class at Georgia that brought in some guy named Herschel Walker, a guy that is basically enshrined and statued over there in Athens for the great career that he had in the national championship that he brought to the University of Georgia in the Bulldog Nation. Well, Terry was a part of that class. And so we're going to talk a little bit about him today. And along to do that with me is Vincent Turner. And Vincent, there are a lot of great things about Terry Hoage that we can talk about. Why don't we go back to the beginning? Give me a sense of what he is and how he did things back in the day that got him recognized and put him on a pedestal in terms of his football prowess and the reason we're talking about him today.
The first knowledge of Terry Hoage, of course, for me was watching him play in the national championship game, that outstanding freshman year at the University of Georgia, Buck Bellew and them win the national championship that year. But the Sugar Bowl, I'm sitting there and he made a key play in that football game when he blocked that field goal. That's when I first heard of Terry Hoage. Then once I moved to this area in 1996, I became friends with a lot of Georgia football fans. And the one thing they kept saying that Terry Hoage, pound for pound, was the best football player in Georgia football history. And I said to myself, why would they say that at a time when this guy came into the 1980 recruiting class with Herschel Walker? Well, I did my research and I go back. He was the last player signed in that class, Harper. I believe he was signed in May. And then he was out of Huntsville, Texas. But what really stuck out to me, looked like the young man was grounded because he wasn't highly recruited. And his aspirations was really to go to school. And he was going to get ready to sign with the university. He wasn't going to sign with the University of Texas, but he was going to go to Texas as a student. And Georgia came in late and offered him a scholarship, but he wasn't even going to go to Texas to play football. His aspiration was going to be a doctor. But he signed with Georgia, and you see what happened. And then I learned later on, he asked Coach Vince Dooley, well, why did you offer me a scholarship and I was the last guy? Because Georgia was wavering on several other players, especially from the state of Georgia. And what I learned was that Vince Dooley said, I ain't going to have no problem worrying about you because you're going to go to class and you're going to make good grades. And you're going to uphold the Georgia tradition that I love. Well, the next year, the guy ends up starting at the University of Georgia. He ends up becoming a two-time All-American. In 1982, Herschel Walker's last year, he led the nations in interceptions with 12. And then he went on to the National Football League, and the guy really said that he only wanted to play a couple of years, really to save money to go to med school. He ended up playing 13 years. But what I love about him more, and we know how we do it here in 100 Yards Football, so they're special kind of football players and people. Warriors come out to play. True warrior, man. True warrior. Did it on the field at the University of Georgia. And Georgia during this time won more games in a 4-year period than any class during that time until now with Kirby Smart. Back to you, Mr. LeBel.
How about this? In his 4 years at Georgia, including his senior year, where Herschel had left and the team still ends up going 10-1-1. How about this? They ranked at the end of the year during his 4-year, they ranked number 1, number 6, number 4, and number 4. Not a bad resume to put together in terms of how did you do when you were in school. Oh my gosh. It took me 4 years and we won 12 games, right? There are some teams that can win 12 in one season. Uh, he had 12. Speaking of 12, he had a dozen interceptions his junior year. He's a guy that got it. And when I played with him in Philadelphia, I'm going to spin around here just a little bit. You could tell from the very beginning, he wasn't the fastest guy, but he was fast. He wasn't the strongest guy, but he was strong. He wasn't the biggest guy, but he was big enough at a safety to be able to play the position. It's what's in between the ears. That dude just, you knew he knew what he was supposed to do. And what made him great from an NFL level is he knew what you needed to do as well, whether it be on special teams, whether it be on the defense that we had in Philadelphia. And I would think that Vince Dooley's comment, "I don't have to worry about you," is something that would carry over to all the NFL coaches that he played for during his 13-year career, including Buddy Ryan, who I played with, Terry, in Philadelphia. Buddy was a coach that's, you better know what you're doing out there. Buddy's nickname was Dumbass for a lot of guys. I got called Dumbass a few times when I would make a mistake. But Buddy would respect you if you didn't make the mistake again. That was the difference. I never heard him call Terry Hoage that, ever. Never. It wasn't going to happen. Vincent, he studied genetics, and he was an All-American, wasn't he? Twice at least 2 times. He was an All-American academic as well as an All-American football player. Studying genetics. This isn't poli-sci. You mentioned him wanting to be a doctor. And in 1980, when genetics was just taking off in terms of its ability to be studied, and you got chromosomes and XY and different photosynthesis you're dealing with, and cell structure, and you're looking at DNA and all this other stuff, and that's what your other hobby is while you're at school, and you do that at an academic rate that's as good as anybody that's out there in the country. What a thrill, man. This guy was brilliant. And I think, Vincent, that he learned to play the game in a different manner because he studied in a different manner. I look at football sometimes mathematically. You have lines, you have linear, you have numbers that are out there, you have different spots. There are angles that you have to play. And I used to snap based on angles, and the angles would be based on where the lines were and where the hash marks were. That's just one simple aspect of it. Take it to a different level on how you would play defense. I'm covering a guy that's coming to me at this angle. I know that if I take 2 steps off, the angle changes. If the quarterback rolls out of the pocket one way or another, the angle changes. Terry was able to see the game and to understand it in a different manner, to where he took advantage of his knowledge. And again, 12 interceptions as a junior. Dude, that's amazing. It's just, you're averaging a pick a game. How do you throw the ball against a guy like that? You have to work. Instead of Lawrence Taylor or Reggie White, you in the secondary, you had to know where Terry Hoage was. That's one of the things that impresses me about him.
I think another gentleman told me, I think it was a game in his junior year, he had an athletic interception against Vanderbilt in a game. They told me, this gentleman was telling me, it was one of the most athletic football players they ever seen at the time in the history of Georgia football. But like I said, what you just mentioned, what impressed me the more was he had Rhodes Scholar type ability. And a lot of people don't become a Rhodes Scholar. This guy was a serious 3.7, I believe 3.7, 3.8 point student. And to translate that over the field is just, hey, man, you got to be mature and you got to be handling your business at a high level. You got to know what direction you're going in life. And it shows me he wasn't really putting all his marbles and trying to play in the NFL. He was there to take care of his business, of course, to help Georgia win football games. But also, too, he knew what he wanted to go down the road and what he wanted to be as, I want to say, a mainstay in this society. And when you become a doctor, that is the highest level of any profession, in my opinion, that you can be, especially as a football player. It's not a lot of people out here that's played the game that's become doctors. Only one guy I can remember right now is Aiden Hutchinson's father, Chris. There was an all Big Ten defensive tackle. He was a doctor because he delivered Aiden Hutchinson. But think about this. You mentioned the times that Georgia finished when he was there. And most of all, you mentioned the 83 season when Herschel Walker decided to go to the USFL. Nobody was looking for that Georgia football team to do anything, but he was a mainstay. He was one of the captains. And they upset #1 Texas in the Cotton Bowl. How ironic we got Texas on our mouths today. How ironic is that? Texas would have won the national championship in '84 Cotton Bowl, but Georgia went down there and upset them. And Terry Hoage was a big part of that. Back to you, Mr. LeBel.
Yeah, you mentioned Vanderbilt just a little while ago. An interesting quote. You mentioned that Vince Dooley had said some things, but how about this? George McIntyre, the Vanderbilt coach, after Hoage had intercepted 3 passes in one game against them, called him a genius in a uniform. And he was a smart dude. He had a 3.7 GPA, which is absolutely fantastic if you stop to think about it. When you're studying genetics of all things, my gosh, that of itself is just amazing that he would take that. He might as well just study nuclear physics, and do the same thing. And a great player. Frank Broyles, who was an analyst with ABC TV, and he and Keith Jackson would talk about a 6'3", 285-pounder out of the University of Mississippi. But he said that he is an end, and he is a cornerback, and he is a safety, all plugged into one. Terry Hoage could do it all. And when I played with Terry in Philadelphia, I mentioned Buddy Ryan and all that kind of stuff. Here's why Terry was so valuable. And this is just a quick story. I got there in 1990. In 1989 and prior to that, the Eagles had a middle linebacker named Mike Rickenbach. Mike was a good player, don't get me wrong, but Mike wasn't a great inside linebacker, and he certainly wasn't the same type of player that Mike Singletary was when Buddy Ryan coached the Chicago Bears in that famous 46 Bear defense that they had. But Mike ended up retiring, and he was done in the 1990 year when I got there. And Byron Evans became the inside linebacker. And nothing against Byron at all, but one of the things that make Mike Singletary so great was his ability to know that defense inside and out, whether it be the 4-6 or a base, whether it's cover 2, cover 3, no matter what you did. Mike Singletary was like Buddy Ryan on the field because he knew where everybody was supposed to be. You can see him going over and moving Dan Hampton down, or taking William Perry and pushing him over, or telling Wilbur Marshall, no, not on this one. He knew what everybody was supposed to do. Mike Rickenbach knew what everybody was supposed to do in Philadelphia. When he left, there was a void from a cerebral standpoint where Byron Evans knew what Byron was supposed to do. But when they went from trips to deuces on each side, or when they had 2 tight ends and one shifts over, you got to change the defense slightly. You've got to know what to do. Terry Hoage was the guy that was the coach on the field. Now, you're not going to take Wes Hopkins out of the game, and you're certainly not going to take Andre Waters out of the game. But if you add Terry in as a nickel cover guy, he could help monitor what everybody was supposed to do in certain key situations. Very smart guy. I mentioned earlier, he sees the game a little bit differently than everybody else does, but in a way, cerebrally, that he knew what he was supposed to do, and he knew what you were supposed to do as well. Invaluable. Coaches will keep a guy like that around forever. They can have a long career, and Terry certainly did have one. 13 years in the NFL speaks for itself.
One of the greatest football players that ever played at the University of Georgia. When you think about great football players at this school, we've been fortunate to have Buck Bellew on the show, Herschel Walker, Ray Goff, Matt Robertson, Kirby Moore. You could go on and on the list. But when Terry Hoage name is mentioned, I guarantee you a lot of Georgia fans are going to have a big smile on their face. And it's a gentleman that was from Huntsville, Texas, out of a state that breathes football. And like I said, the most important memory in my memory bank is 2. One, he wasn't even going to try to even walk on at the University of Texas. He said he was just going to go to school, man, and work on his academics and being a doctor. And 2, him, there you go. Thank you, Logan. Him blocking that field goal as a true freshman in the Sugar Bowl, bringing Georgia their first national championship in some years, I believe since 1942. That was a big play in that football game, man. And he was a true freshman. And look how he's extending. That's what I call athletic. That's what I call Clyde Drexler. That's what I call fire, slammer jammer. Because you got to get up. You know what I'm saying, Harper? You got to get up, man, for him to block that field goal. Very special player, man. In a very special time in college football. At a very special time when Athens was on fire. Back to you, Mr. LeBel.
That's such a stinking cool picture right there for a couple of reasons. One, even if you don't know it, it's just a cool picture. If you understand football and you realize that it's a national championship game and that he actually did block the kick, and that's a buddy of yours or somebody that you know, or if you're a Bulldog fan, that's one of your guys. Can it get any sweeter than that? That is just such an outstanding picture. Now, if you're a Notre Dame guy, no, you don't think that's a great picture at all. That's where you want to take your cap and throw it down to the ground and go, that doggone 14 from Georgia, he was a difference maker that cost us a national championship. But guess what? Number 14 was a difference maker that ended up winning a national championship. And by the way, he's a freshman. He's about 18 years old when that picture took place. Amazing. 43-4-1. That was the record of the University of Georgia while Terry Hoage was there. 43 wins, 4 losses, and a tie. Pretty successful college career and national championship that'll never be taken away from him. After football, Terry bought some land out in California in a place called Paso Robles, south of San Francisco, about an hour and a half, give or take. And he had a winery.
Mm-hmm.
He grapes. He and his wife decided to start a little business. They did it for about 20 years. There was a death in the family. And when that affected them as a couple, because they were both pretty much in charge of the whole operation. When it first started, Terry and his wife were doing just about everything in terms of growing the grapes, getting the winery started, how you manufacture and produce from bottling to final product. It's not an easy process, but there's a picture of him leaning against his fence, and that obviously is not during peak grape season. That's probably in the wintertime. But I will tell you this, it was a successful winery, but he just decided, you know what, family, importance in my life, things that affect me, they changed for a little bit. So he shut down the business. It was in January a year ago in 2023. And he's decided to spend a lot more time with family and around people that he loves. So God bless Terry Hoage for everything that he did for the National Football League, for college football, for his high school, for the area that he's been a part of. It seems like everything is a little bit better when Terry Hoage is around. Vincent, your final thoughts?
I'm going to look in the camera. Terry Hoage, I'm 64 years old, but when I die, I'm always going to take to my grave is that you was one of the greatest defensive players that played in the SEC ever. You and the Lord, Reggie White, Jack Hacksaw Reynolds. You and that Lord, man. Billy Cannon. Don't let no one tell you to come in as the last player signed in the 1980 class. In the career you had at Georgia, you one of the greatest defensive players ever played in the SEC, my brother. Much blood to you. Much love to you. Much blessings to you, Mr. Terry Hoage. It's been an honor today to honor you here today on 100 Yards of Football with your great former teammate and Mr. Harper LeBel. When they mention the names of White, Leroy Jordan, oh my God, Louis Oliver, man, they need to mention your name at the highest level because you one of the best that's played on the defensive side of the ball in this conference. Back to you, Mr. Harper LeBel.
Well, thank you. Kind words, obviously, Vincent, for him, and well-deserved. So, Terry, as a teammate, it was a pleasure to be a part of your career and you being a part of mine. And so I thank you so much for all that you did. As Dave Baker used to say in the National, for all you did for the NFL, for all that you will continue to do for football, we thank you. Appreciate it, Terry. You did a great job. I'm Harper LeBel. He's Vincent Turner. Our producer is Logan Landers. Thank you for allowing us to share some stories about some people that have made a difference. We're calling it Teammates of the Past. It's a part of 100 Yards of Football. We appreciate you tuning in and being a part of today's show. Thank you very much. Have a great day.